Hey all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and today it is time for part 19 of the record collection tour that I've been doing. We'll get straight into it. We are wrapping up the M's here today. Excuse me. And then, yeah, just kind of plugging away as we normally do. Kind of a wide variety of artists here, and if I'm going to be honest, a lot of albums in this list that I have heard but have not heard in an extended period of time. This one, though, I mean, it has been a little while since I put this on, but this record I actually know pretty damn well because I got really into it probably my freshman year of college, give or take. Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues. Yeah, it's a great freaking album. I'm trying to remember how I was introduced to it. I think because I know my mom actually really likes this album. She had kind of introduced me to it at one point, but I think I might have heard of it before she played it for me. Hard to tell. But it's a great record. It's a great, you could argue it's kind of a very early example of progressive rock, progressive pop rock, I suppose you could say. And the usage of like mellotrons and things like that are on here. It's really fantastic. To me, and I've heard maybe the first half dozen or so Moody Blues albums. To me, this is the highlight pretty clearly. And I'm very happy to say that I was able to see them live on, I think, what ended up being their farewell tour, the 50th anniversary tour for this album, where they played the entire record in full in the second half of their show, Tuesday afternoon, and of course the amazing Nights in White Satin clear highlights here on that record. And I have a few other Moody Blues records here. We start off with, what's this called? This is In Search of the Lost Chord, isn't it? Yep. In Search of the Lost Chord. This one has a couple of really strong tracks. Ride My Seesaw is probably the one that I know the best and like the best. They played that one, and I think they played as well live in that show. I think Ride My Seesaw was the closer after they had finished the whole Days of Future Past set. Yeah, it's a strong album, and from what I remember, probably the second best one that I heard after after Days of Future Past. These next two records, though, again, I own both of them, and I have heard both of them, but not in quite a while, so I don't have a whole lot to say. On the Threshold of a Dream from 1969. This one's a gatefold. I'll show you that. Yeah, I know there's kind of a sweet type of idea on the second side of this record, but again, it's been so long that I don't have really anything intelligent to say about it. And the same goes for To Our Children's Children's Children here, which is also a gatefold that I'll describe here. Yeah, I saw the band. I'm looking forward to revisiting their stuff in full because I remember these albums being intriguing. But Days of Future Past is the only one I've heard more than once. But yeah, I saw the band. It wasn't right before Graham Edge died, but it would have been maybe a couple of years beforehand. So he was on the drums for that tour. And again, I mean, him being on the drums at that point is about where, like, about on the level of like Ringo Starr drumming on his current tours, which is that he doesn't really do much of it anymore. And when he is drumming, it's going to be very like basic stuff because, I mean, he's in his 80s. So, but it was interesting to see them, Justin Hayward, John Lodge, obviously. And Hayward, I think, especially sounded really good live. Okay. This one I inherited as part of another collection, so I have not heard this. This is the Motor City Rollers with the Stevie Wonder Songbook. a bunch of Stevie Wonder covers from 77, it looks like. So this is right after Songs in the Key of Life came out. So, I mean, this is, comprising most of his big hits, both earlier hits like Ma Chérie Amour, Signed, Sealed, Delivered, and then stuff like Superstition, Living for the City is on here, I Wish. A lot of great cover selections. Again, I've not heard it, so I can't comment on the quality of the covers. And we will get to Stevie Wonder proper eventually towards the end of these videos. But yeah, cool little thing that I'm glad to have, glad to own. And then this record I have not heard, because I've not heard a full-length album by this band, I don't think. Or if I have, it's been a while. But I'm sure some people watching will know this album quite well. This is Mott by Mott the Hoople. I also inherited this as part of another collection. I will reserve my thoughts, because again, I don't really know Mott the Hoople's music well at all. I know Ian Hunter's vocals. I know that Ian Hunter's a really great vocalist. But yeah, Mott the Hoople, kind of one of those 70s rock bands that have sort of slipped me by a little bit. And I am intrigued to eventually explore them a little bit more in depth. There's a few kind of bigger name 70s rock bands that I haven't really explored beyond hearing a hit of theirs on the radio. Like Free, off the top of my head, Free is another example of that. I think I've heard maybe one Free album in full. And from my experience, at least the people in the communities that I'm a part of prefer Mott the Hoople quite a bit to Free. But in any case, this one I have heard though, and it's not an easy one to talk about for obvious reasons. This is Mount Eerie, A Crow Looked at Me. Mount Eerie as a project, I'm not a Phil Elverum super fan, although I've really liked everything that I've heard of him. I've heard some Mount Eerie stuff. I've heard some Microphones stuff. I did really like Microphones in 2020, the project that he put out under that Microphones name. And then, what was it called? Now Only, the sequel record to A Crow Looked at Me. I really liked that. There's only so much that you can really say to analyze the musical merits of an album like this that is clearly a coping mechanism. If you're not aware of the backstory behind it, this is Phil Elverum's album about losing his wife and the mother of his child, and to cancer in a very kind of horrible way. And it is very raw, they feel like diary entries in the sense of just how blunt they are. There's no kind of masking the lyricism and any sort of cliches or anything along those lines. It's just his feelings, blunt and frank as they are. And, it's difficult to listen to, without a doubt, but it is probably one of the most transparently honest records about death that you will ever find. For as much as I will praise albums like David Bowie's Black Star, Leonard Cohen's You Want It Darker, some of the Sufjan Stevens records, those albums are, I think, they're grander portraits of death in some ways. Like You Want It Darker, there's a whole kind of spiritual component to that record. And talking about the implications of that, Bowie's Black Star kind of isn't even, it's about mortality, but it's not about imminent death necessarily. At least most of the songs aren't. And when Bowie talks about him, again, it's your kind of typical Bowie lyricism where it's masked in these references to Lazarus and whoever. But Mount Eerie is just very frank. Phil Elverum here is basically no, death is real. Death fucking sucks. It's the worst possible thing you can go through to lose somebody. And, this is how I'm dealing with it in whatever way that makes sense. It's It's a powerful record. It's a meaningful record, and it's one that I'm happy to own, even though, again, not it's not something that's going to get frequently spun on the old turntable. Okay, this is a band that I have heard. I've heard a number of albums by this band, but I do want to explore John Darnielle's songwriting more. Mountain Goats, The Sunset Tree. I love this album. This is so damn good. You know, Darnielle's like songwriting style. You know, as I try to get a grasp of what it is, I think he is such a colorful lyricist, um, and such a blunt lyricist, but he's also not cynical. Like he could be cynical, I think, if he wanted to, and I think Sunset Tree is a good example of where he's talking about his own life. He's reflecting on his own upbringing and the difficulties therein. And you get the sense that this is a guy who could be painfully cynical all the time, without exception. But I think there is life in his lyrics and in his music. And I think there is a sense of hope. Um, I think the song This Year, which may be my favorite song on here, speaks to that completely. There's just a sense of resilience in his story and in his personality. And you get that throughout this record. If it's not his most personal album, it's damn close. Because he really loves doing the whole kind of, you know, character portraits, talking about different people type of thing. But this is very personal. And songs like Broom People, This Year, Dinu Lapati's Bones, Lion's Teeth, Pale Green Things. There's so many like fantastic tracks where he is reflecting on both the good and less so parts of his upbringing. And yeah, there's something about him. And he also, like, as a singer, again, he's not going to win awards, but it's a distinctive delivery. I mean, I've heard people call Darnielle sort of the, like, contemporary version of Bob Dylan, in a lot of ways, or one of the closest equivalents we have to a Dylan in modern society. And I think that tracks on some levels, you know. He's not a protest music type of guy per se, but he is, again, just a very effective lyricist to the point where I would call it poetry. And I think this other record, I have two Mountain Goats records. I think this other one also proves that. I don't know if this is my second favorite Mountain Goats records. It's pretty close between a couple of them, but I love Goths. This came out in 2017, I think. And it is essentially a, you know, kind of discussion about the kind of subculture of Goths, and, you know, reflecting on it in a very positive way, because Darnielle himself was a member of it or adjacent to it for a considerable while. And yeah, this is a great album in some ways. I think a darker and more, I say it's a more grandiose album than some of the other Mountain Goats ones, but I think that's because in a lot of ways this album is completely, like, not overshadowed, but like the stage is set by the opening track Rain in Soho, which is pretty much unlike any other Mountain Goats song I've ever heard. It is so bombastic. You have these choral vocals, really prominent kind of piano ideas here. There's not much in the way of like guitars and stuff on this record. It's fantastic. If you haven't already, I would check out the review that Mark Grondin from Spectrum Pulse did on this record. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. One of his best moments for sure. And yeah, Mountain Goats, I look forward to exploring them more in depth. Again, I've heard some of their other stuff, like All Hail West Texas, or records like that. Beat the Champ, I think I've heard. But getting into them a little bit more effectively is something that I'm looking forward to doing. But I'm happy to own those two records. Mr. Welcome to the Real World. I'm trying to remember if I've heard this album in full. Because this has their two big hits, Broken Wings and Kyrie, which I love as pop songs. I think they're both really good pop songs. And I remember in college that this would get spun on the turntable sometimes. But I think the goal was to listen to those two songs. I don't remember anything else about this record, so I cannot really comment on it. But if you have heard it, let me know if you like it. And again, I would imagine with those two songs being that good, that the rest of the album probably has some value to it, if nothing else. I have not heard this. This I also got as part of a collection. Eddie Murphy's self-titled. I don't know. It's Eddie Murphy. Right as he is like jumping onto the scene, pretty much. And yeah, I don't have anything else to say about it because I haven't heard it. I'm not like I've watched some stand-up comedy specials. Like I've seen a few George Carlin specials, for instance, but I'm not a stand-up connoisseur. I couldn't tell you a whole lot about the merits of some of these stand-up comedians. I haven't seen Bo Burnham's Inside, for God's sakes. I want to, because I'm sure I'll really like it, but I haven't seen that one yet. But I digress. I'm sure that's funny. All right. I feel like we've been talking about a lot of records that I don't know super well, but now we come to one that I adore. Kacey Musgraves, Golden Hour. God, this was good. I remember when this came out, and I remember writing a review for it. At the time, I had an account. I mean, it still exists, so you can still read the review on a website called SputnikMusic.com. I wrote up a review for this record, and I think it was this review where I entered some sort of like reviewing contest or something that they were doing, and I won, and I ended up getting featured on some website profile or something. I don't know. That was 5 years ago now, so it all blurs together. But yeah, Kacey Musgraves is a fantastic artist, and I think it'll be interesting to look back on her influence on country music and see kind of how she has led the charge and in what ways she has influenced country's direction. Because the way that country music is going right now, with some of the songs that are popular, is not really related at all to what she has been doing. Her focus has been very kind of, integrating country music with elements of like psychedelia, dream pop, dare I say it, electro pop. And that's not really the direction that you see people like Morgan Wallen going. But Golden Hour to me is the peak of her musical achievements so far. I think that entire first side is fantastic. Slow Burn, Into Lonely Weekend, Butterflies, Oh What a World, I remember has this like weird vocoder effect that you might like, you might not, hard to say. And then the second side, I really love Velvet Elvis. High Horse, that's the one that gets like radio airplay now. I still hear that come on at like restaurants and stuff sometimes. It's a club banger, as they say, but it's a lot of fun. And Rainbow's really nice too. It's how they incorporate the more trippy influences on this record. It is very tasteful. I really like it. And it doesn't go too over the top. And her voice is just so clear and bright. Like it works perfectly for a more traditional country setting, which you get on some of her earlier albums, like Same Trailer, Different Park. But in this setting, I think it just kind of cuts through the mix in such an effective way, and I love it. I love that album. That one has been very significant to me as far as my own kind of path as a musical critic. And I can go back to the review I wrote even now and say that that's probably one of the ones I'm the most proud of. Really good stuff. Nas, Illmatic. What is there to say about Nas? You know, one of the most famous hip hop albums of all time, and even to this day, I would say it's one of the best. Both the combination of production and Nas's flow throughout the whole thing, it does not let up for its entire runtime. And I was able to find this at a pretty damn affordable price. So, I think my hip hop collection before the last maybe year or two was very small. I think almost all of the hip hop records that I own right now I have acquired over the last couple of years. And I'm happy to see it growing, because there are certain artists who I still haven't, who I still want to prioritize collecting. I do want to prioritize getting some Kanye stuff for instance. What else? The Chronic, probably. Doggy Style. Some more contemporary stuff that, like Earl Sweatshirt, maybe. Tyler, the Creator. Just quite a few things that I am excited to be collecting at some point in the near future. But I really like seeing how it's kind of grown, how that side of my collection has kind of grown. Hip hop and jazz are kind of two genres that I'm trying to prioritize beefing up when it comes to my own collection. This is neither. This is the exact opposite of those two genres. This is the National. Sleep Well Beast. 2017. I think if you were to ask me right now, this is probably my favorite National album, although it's really between that and Trouble Will Find Me and High Violet and probably a couple others too. To me, I think this album kind of summarizes a lot of the things that the National do best, both their more sedate sounds that they do on your Trouble Will Find Me records, I Am Easy to Find, which came out after this, but it also has some of the more intense stuff. Day I Die, Turtleneck, System Only Dreams and Total Darkness, maybe my favorite National song. This was another one where I remember actually when it came out, and I remember listening to it when it came out and liking it, but then I didn't explore it for a while afterwards, until I did a dive through the entire National discography. And yeah, this one has always stood out to me as one of my favorites, so really happy to own it. And the National are a band that has been rising in my esteem lately, so I'm excited to collect more and more of their stuff as time goes on. All right, flip it over here. Randy Newman, Sail Away. Yeah, great album. Show the gatefold here. Just lyrics, I think. I've only heard, I think, the first 3 Randy Newman albums. So this, to me, this is the best of those 3. And I think this one and 12 Songs are his most acclaimed records anyways. But I love his just approach to songwriting. He is someone who is very just kind of cynical and matter of fact and straightforward. And I think that combined with his genuinely just kind of one of a kind voice. Again, you have that Dylan connection there, where Newman is almost inimitable. You can try, but no one can do Randy Newman like Randy Newman can. And you mix those two things together and couple that with an ability to write melodies and musical ideas that is very underappreciated Like Newman's abilities as like an arranger of strings, as a composer, are they fall very under the radar, but the guy is actually fantastic at that. Um, yeah, it's great stuff, and it's a recipe for making someone who, you know, is a household name on some level, even though um, he's probably one of the most unassuming household names that there's ever been in musical history. Um, and I don't think that's just because of the Toy Story stuff, but I digress. All right, couple of Laura Nero records. This is Eli and the 13th Confession. Another one where it has been a while since I've heard it. And I do go back and forth between this one and the other one I have here as my favorite Laura Nero record. I love her voice though. I love her voice so much. It's beautiful. And the actual like songwriting on here, such an interesting, I don't know, composer, I guess. I'll show out the other one here, New York Tendaberry. Yeah, her. I feel bad not having anything intelligent to say because again, it's probably been 5 years, 6 years since I've heard either of those records. I think when I first explored her, that was before I had heard the work of a lot of the kind of great female singer-songwriters to come. So this is before I had heard any Joni Mitchell apart from Blue. Probably before I'd heard any Tori Amos. Definitely before I'd heard any Fiona Apple. Björk, etc., etc., whoever. So I make this point because not to say that I need that context to appreciate Laura Nero, but I think the feedback that I have heard consistently is that her music is best appreciated when you see kind of what came after her, like realizing how ahead of her time she was in some of the ideas that she was doing, and in how she like approaches her vocal layering and stuff like that. I don't know. It probably sounds unintelligent when I say it that way. Point is, I'm very excited to explore her discography, and we'll certainly do a video on the channel when I do. But yeah, I do remember liking both of those albums a fair bit. I think I've heard her first 4 records, and I've liked all of those. Okay, this is Gilbert O'Sullivan himself from 1972. God, this is a dumbass album cover. It has Alone Again Naturally on it, which is a song that I love. I don't know a single other song on this record. I've never heard it. But Alone Again Naturally is how to describe it? It's a very, it's a dour song. It's one of those mixtures of dour with kind of semi-upbeat, pseudo-upbeat material, melodically. And I think people make fun of it because of that, because it's kind of, oh, this is a sad sack kind of being down on himself type of thing. And I don't know. I think that's a fair enough reading, but I like it. I really like it. I always have. So, and I think Claire is the other big hit that he had. I like that one too. He's got a very distinctive kind of voice, and you can really hear like his accent kind of jumping out at you too, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I don't know anything else of his, so can't comment on that. Phil Oakes. All the News That's Fit to Sing. His debut record from '64, I believe. Phil Oakes, singer-songwriter. Calling him in the Dylan vein would be too easy. I think Phil Oakes was very much his own thing. I think that is borne out by his career path. Now, when I listened to Phil Oakes' discography the first time around, I thought he was someone who actually got better as he went along. I don't know if this was like his worst record here, because it has stuff like, you know, Talking Vietnam on it, Too Many Martyrs, stuff like that. You know, there's some great bits of songwriting. I think to me, in some ways, Oakes gets more captivating when he's playing with more kind of sonic ideas towards the end of his life, which is a sad sentence to say. He didn't live very long. All the News That's Fit to Sing is probably the closest he gets to like a traditional kind of here's me and my guitar and I'm singing like Dylan or whatever. This record is Pleasures of the Harbor, which is towards the middle of his career, if memory serves. And yeah, this already there's differences here because of the songwriting structures. I mean, these songs are significantly longer. These are lusher tracks too, if memory serves, or somewhat lusher. And maybe people would see that as an issue, but I don't. I think, again, Oakes comes down to like a what could have been type of figure. I think what he leaves us with musically is fantastic, but he plays around with so much during the 5 or 6 albums that he released during his life that it does make you wonder kind of, you know, what directions he would have gone down in the 70s. Whether he would have followed, like what path he would have followed, I suppose. Yeah, I don't know. Phil Oakes, another one who I have excitement to explore soon. Same for this fellow. Roy Orbison, In Dreams. This record is beat to shit. So at some point I'll want to get a better copy because I think the cover is certainly warped. The record might be too. But yeah, In Dreams is on here, which is terrific. Blue Bayou. You know, Roy Orbison had a one-of-a-kind voice. He really did, and people say that, and that's the cliche about Roy Orbison, but I think that's very fair. I think that's a very accurate statement. His approach to singing and that really distinctive vibrato that he had, his diction, it was very Southern, but very classical at the same time. I don't know how to describe, like, I can't think of a better way to describe it. And it was captivating, always captivating. In Dreams, probably my favorite of the small handful of Roy Orbison records that I've heard, but I am looking forward to doing his discography, hopefully in full. I don't know how hard it is to find some of his like 70s work when he's like really kind of fallen off the radar, but we'll see. I've not heard this album. This is Buck Owens' Buckaroos Anywhere USA. The only Buck Owens record I've heard is I've Got a Tiger by the Tail, which is a great album. This one, I've got nothing for this one. Again, this was part of another collection that I inherited. Although I do think this is one of the more popular Buck Owens records. So, you know, I've liked what I've heard of Buck Owens. I look forward to hearing more at some point. All right. Tom Paxton, Ramblin' Boy. A lot of kind of 60s artists in this video, I'm noticing. This is the self-titled debut from Tom Paxton. Paxton is an interesting singer-songwriter. You know, like he's nothing flashy, but there are he has a very just kind of subtle way with melody, and my favorite songs on here, The Last Thing on My Mind, I Can't Help But Wonder Where I'm Bound, Ramblin' Boy, you know, they're you know, very, you know, they're subtle, but they have these like distinctive melodies, these kind of earworm melodies that get in your head. The Last Thing on My Mind in particular is beautiful. I've heard a couple of some really good covers of that song. Um, and Paxton's still going. I actually I followed his Facebook page for whatever reason, and he's still out there releasing new albums and he's performing live and stuff like that. He's still a very active creator of music, which is really cool. Good for him. And then we end with the 60s. Two last records here. Peter, Paul, and Mary, self-titled. I mean, these are bargain bin albums, so I got these for bargain bin prices. Peter, Paul, and Mary, again, probably the prime example of the that kind of really light early 60s folk sound, the pre-Dylan folk sound. Which is not to say there's nothing of value here. It is well done, very pretty. They do Where Have All the Flowers Gone on here, for instance, which is really pretty and beautiful. But it's all very safe. And I look at that picture, everybody in their suits and looking very affable and amiable. The folk scene definitely, I think, needed a bit of a shot in the arm, and I'm sure a lot of folk musicians at the time would say the same thing. And then Moving, from which I think was their second record, if memory serves. This one has Puff the Magic Dragon on it, which is probably the most famous song that is distinctly associated with Peter, Paul, and Mary. It's a pretty song. Again, that's another one where some people don't like it at all. And I won't say that it's anything grand or anything super deep, but I like it for what it is. It's a nice enough song. Okay, that is about it for this volume. I feel like this was another one where I ended up having a lot of records that I didn't have a whole lot to say anything about, so I do apologize for that. Again, I like having a collection where I haven't heard everything, and a lot of these records are on my to-listen list or my revisit list if I've heard it once years ago and didn't have a whole lot to say about it because I didn't remember it. So looking forward to that, and then I'll have more intelligent things to say at that point. But until then, I want to thank you all for watching. More installments of this to come. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell a friend as well. And until next time, I will see you right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive.